Welcome to episode 10 of the Pangolin podcast. I'm your host, Toby Jermin. Thank you very much for joining me. In each episode, I've invited a professional wildlife photographer to imagine themselves in a remote location, and along with their camera gear, they're allowed to bring 5 photographs to hang on the wall of their humble dwelling. Now, 4 of these must be their own, and the final image must be one that they admire by another photographer. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the images as we talk, but for audio listeners on other platforms, there's a link to a gallery in the description. On today's show,
I run out in the water, the waves are breaking, so I'm one eye on the waves and one eye on this little sea lion pup. And of course, I wanted to get kind of eye level. So, not only am I running out there, I'm like going down on my knees as he's coming towards me. And that may have been a bad idea. Don't do this at home.
Today's guest is an award-winning wildlife and landscape photographer and co-founder of Backcountry Gallery. Known for his genuine passion for the outdoors, he captures stunning images from remote wilderness around the world. He's also a respected educator, sharing his expertise through workshops, online tutorials, and podcasts like this. His approachable style has inspired countless photographers to improve their craft, and in our case, to even start a YouTube channel. So I'm very excited to have him on this big 10th episode. Welcome to the show, Steve Perry.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. That's very nice of you to have me on. Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, Steve, I know where you've just been. Would you like to share with all the listeners where you've just been? You've just returned home, haven't you?
We did. We just returned home. We were in the Chobe River, and we were at the Delta as well. So we were with your company there for about a month and had an absolute phenomenally good time. Saw so many good sightings, so many interesting things. All of our guests were really happy, and I know I have some new portfolio shots thanks to being there.
And you spent some time on our new houseboat as well, Steve. How do you like the upgrade?
It was like the old ones here, and the other ones, can't reach high enough. It was really a significant upgrade. It is the envy of the Chobe.
I'd like to assure people I've not told Steve to say this. This is a genuine review. So there we go. And I know this isn't going to be one of the 5 photographs that you've chosen, but you shared this with me just before we started. And I think we need to include it as well because you had such a unique sighting. We're going to share this photo with the listeners and the viewers and just explain what is going on here.
Okay, so you have 2 photos. The first one is a crocodile, and he has got a catfish in his mouth. And if you look inside the mouth of the catfish, there's another fish inside the mouth of the catfish. And he was actually in the process of lifting it out of the water to give it a good shake. And that's where I captured this moment right here.
It's extraordinary looking at this. And yeah, I mean, it's lovely light. Was it late afternoon or something like that?
Actually, we barely got this one because the sun was basically kissing the horizon when we got this. If you look at the crocodile, you can see that he's in shadow underneath. That's because the sun was just basically going down. We were just about to lose it. So he came up and I was like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And the fun thing is we had no idea the catfish had the other fish in his mouth until after we looked at the images. So he came up and I'm just snapping away as he's coming up with a 600 millimeter. And yeah, we had no idea until after we looked at the photos what we had there. So that was pretty cool. And then I had too much lens at that moment because he really, was banging it around there. But my wife, who was shooting next to me, had her 400-8, and she got the following shot, and the catfish being kind of torn apart and the other fish being ejected from the catfish. So the other fish is just floating in there in the air. And both of those shots happen within a split second of each other. And it's neat because a lot of times, you talk about like being with your partner and doing photography, and it's so rare that you both end up having that kind of synchronization there with your image. It's like both of these images work very well on their own, but together they really tell this story. So it was really a neat experience. And that was just one of the sightings that we had. We had a ton of very unique sightings there. So
when you shared it with me, my first impression was this barbel was having a really good day and it caught a lovely, nice big fish. And the bream, which is the small fish, he's having a really bad day. Give it a second, a crocodile comes to the rescue, ejects him, his day gets better. As you can see, the barbel's day got considerably worse. But yeah, we often bemoan that it's very difficult to take an original photograph, but well done. Well done. I don't think anyone is ever going to replicate this one.
It's a tough 1-2 punch there for sure. Matter of fact, we were talking about it with all the advent of AI. I'm worried that people are like, "Oh, that's AI," but have the raw files to prove it. It's not.
I'd like to see the prompt that you had to put into AI to generate this image. It's gonna, I think even AI
Yeah,
is going to
right.
go, I'm sorry, no, I
Yeah.
can't do it. That's impossible. Anyway, we're already like 5 or 6 minutes into the podcast. We haven't even touched on your first image yet. Let's crack on with the show, Steve, before we wax lyrical about all sorts of things to do with this shot. Tell us about your first shot, please, and why you chose it. Please describe this to us.
Okay, so what we were looking at here is a bison all wet, standing out in the rain with soft bluish kind of background. And this was taken in Wind Cave National Park. And it was a busy Friday or Saturday night in Custer State Park. And there's a little cut through that you can take over to Wind Cave when the crowds get too bad. And so I snuck over there because it was just a zoo in the other place. There's some prairie dogs there. Sometimes you see coyotes, and the clouds started getting darker and darker and darker. And once the rain started getting heavy, I'm like, okay, I'm going to see if I can get some of these bison in the rain. So I start driving, and it just, at this point, it's pouring, and there's wind blowing, and there's lightning, and it's the full thunderstorm experience. And this guy's up there, and he is on a little bit of a hill. So looking out of the car, I'm basically at eye level. So I was really excited about that. So I rolled the window down, and I'm kind of worried about ruining the car because there's so much water pouring in at that moment. But I'm like, I'm going to get this shot. And I stick the lens out, and I'm firing away. And I ended up using a lot of different techniques for this one. The first one is I dropped my shutter speed down to 2/50th of a second. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it was dark. If you look at the ISO for this, it's 4,000. It was really, really dark. So, a lower shutter speed was kind of necessary anyhow. But on the other hand, I also wanted to make sure I had some streaking in the rain. If you use a little bit of faster shutter speed, your rain turns into kind of little pinpoints. And that's okay. I mean, it depends what you're after. But for this shot, I wanted to emphasize the rain a little bit more. So I want to be between 160 and 2/50th of a second. That's kind of my sweet spot for length on these drops. I didn't want to go too slow, though, because, again, it's a thunderstorm. There are winds shaking the truck and everything else. So it was kind of a challenge. And basically what I did is I did long bursts. So I used single point AF, got on the eye, because subject detection is not going to get on a bison eye. And I just kind of laid on it. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first, of course, is the slow shutter speed. So I'm playing the odds that even though the truck is moving a little bit from the wind, even though I'm not completely steady, and maybe the bison's not completely steady, maybe one of these is going to be sharp. Maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 5 or 1 in 20, depending on how much things are moving. The other thing is when you have any kind of precipitation, you're trying to get that sharp eyeball, you got to do a longer burst, because some of those shots, you're going to have a streak right in front of the eye, and you have to kind of shoot between the raindrops so that you get just the right streaking pattern. And using a longer burst gives you more opportunities to do that. Plus, again, you're playing the odds to try to get a sharp image. So a lot of different techniques were at play here. And I was on a little bit of a deadline because I was in the truck and I knew my wife would kill me if I destroyed the electronics in the door and the windows stopped working.
I think it's also an important lesson in the fact that animals like this, which are very large, dark subjects, I mean, obviously we've got Cape Buffalo where we are, they're often very difficult to take photographs of because they're very large. They don't really have an expression. So what I love here is the story. And also it's another lesson in, just because it's raining, don't stop shooting, even if it does mean you're going to break your car. You gotta roll with what you've got, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell people some of my absolute best photos are taken in the absolute worst weather. So a lot of times when the weather gets bad, I want to go out and I want to try to shoot in those conditions. I'm always looking for moody, rainy, interesting weather because it just adds so much to the photo. So with a bison, you see them all over the West. And most of the time their heads down, they're eating, there's nothing going on there. It's kind of boring. So when you get some conditions that turn it into an interesting shot, you have to capitalize on that.
It's a really, really lovely, lovely photograph. Okie dokie. Let's move straight on to your second image, please. Will you tell us why you chose this one?
In this shot, we have a little lion cub kind of leading on a little trail. And behind him is another little lion cub, one of his siblings. And behind his sibling is his mother. And what I love about this shot is that I feel like there's a bunch of stories in there. And it also kind of speaks to lion behavior. I'm a huge fan of big cats, well, just cats in general. And I love the body language and some of the expressions and things that you get from them. So with this little one, he was walking down this trail. He's the brave one because mom's behind him. These guys were probably 4 or 5 weeks old. This was our first morning in the Serengeti, so it was very exciting. And basically, they're walking down this trail, and we're playing hopscotch with the vehicles at this point. So everybody gets a chance. So one vehicle goes, and then when the lions walk past it, the next one's there ready to go and get the shot. And this little guy in the front, he's got his mouth open, his ears are forward. One of the things people forget to look at when they're photographing wildlife are the ears. Everyone looks for catch lights. Everybody knows that's a pretty common one, but you got to watch what the ears are doing. And if you look at the little guy in front, his ears are forward and they're engaged with whatever it is he's looking at. So it makes you wonder, what is he looking at off to the side that we can't see? Then you see his little sibling there, and those ears are back. So that tells you that he is listening for his mom. He wants to make sure mom's there. You see his ears are back and his eyes are forward. And then you look at mom, and she's looking off more or less my direction, but she's listening off to the right, and she's listening to the rear as well. So she's kind of very aware of everything that's going around because she needs to protect her cubs. Every animal in the shot has a story, and I think it worked out really well. Plus, I was using a longer lens, so that allowed me to shoot back from a little bit farther distance. And the advantage with that is it gives you the impression that I was on the ground with them. And I promise you, I was not, did not break any rules. And probably if I were on the ground with them, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But the nice thing, one of the things I think people make mistakes is they get too close to the animals. Just because you can get next to an animal in your car and shoot down on it doesn't mean you should. It's always better to be back a little farther and use a longer lens because it kind of gives you that eye level impression. And when you're shooting more or less eye to eye, or it feels that way in the photo anyhow, it creates a much deeper sense of intimacy. When you shoot down on an animal, it dominates the animal and you lose all of that. And I guess the last thing on this image I would want to talk about is the big mistake I made. I was at 400th of a second, and it just goes to show that you need to pay attention to your settings. I was at 400th of a second at ISO 640, so I could have gone faster. And what had happened, I was using auto ISO, manual with auto ISO like I always do. And this was our first morning out, so I was a little rusty. So we had initially started, and I was at 400th of a second shooting something else, and I neglected to look at that when they were coming down the path. I got lucky because I had a few of these that were nice and sharp, including this one, but there was a few that were not so sharp. And it was a silly mistake, but it's one of the things I tell people is before you come on a big trip, make sure you spend some time in the field and just get back into practice. Don't do what I do what I say, because obviously I didn't, or I wouldn't have made that mistake. Probably the number one thing, train yourself when you lift that camera up to always look along the bottom and just double check your settings before every shot. And I try to do that. If anyone figures out how to make that a habit, let me know.
You need a little voice. Just go, Steve, did you remember? Every time you pick up your camera, some motion sensor or something like that. See, this is what I love about you and your content is we've been watching your YouTube channel for a very long time, and that's how I reached out to you. But I love the fact that you are always very giving in your knowledge. You don't hold anything back. You know, nothing's a big secret. And I think that's the way it should be. But where did this all begin for you? Were you always into photography? Was it a passion from an early age?
It was. I started off around, I don't know, I think I was about 10 years old doing wildlife photography. And I was selling articles and photos to magazines when I was a teenager. Not a lot, but I was selling some. And a friend of mine and I were, there were some local woodlands around our house. And we go out and cause the mischief in the woods that boys cause. I don't want to go into deeper detail, but let's just say there were some fires lit that probably shouldn't have been. But anyway, he and his dad were hunting all the time. And he would tell me about those stories. I'm like, ooh, I should go hunting. That sounds like fun. I like the outdoors. I'd probably like to hunt. I start talking about that around home. And my mom came over to my dad and she says, is there something you could do with him in the outdoors that won't end up with me eating squirrels in the end of it? So dad said, well, yeah, he likes that new camera that I got. And by the way, I did not get to use that camera. And it was a Minolta X700, pretty fancy at the time. I ended up with eventually a Pentax ME Super, which was very used, and a JCPenney 70-200 lens, and took some really awful photos with it. But I was hooked. I was really hooked after that. And I've been doing it ever since.
And your company's called Backcountry Gallery, but you don't have a gallery, do you?
No, I got to rename it, but I can't at this point. I'm stuck. The original idea was that I would have a gallery. And then I went to a seminar and it featured Tom Mangelson, Franz Lanting, and Art Wolf. Three well-respected, super, super great guys. I ended up talking to Tom for just probably less than 5 minutes because I was going to start a gallery. And I told him, I said, I feel like you are the foremost expert on galleries. What advice would you give me? And he told me not to do it. He says, the future lies in education. So I immediately came home, shifted gears, started a YouTube channel, started working on books because I have been doing educational stuff forever. So that was right in my wheelhouse. So yeah, the original intent behind the name was to have a gallery, but it ended up not working out that way. But we've kept the name because everybody seems to know it now. So,
well, never say never. Never say never. One day you might do a gallery. You know, when you're bored of all the traveling and you're zooming around the place, and you think to yourself, I want a nice, easy life now. Have a gallery and then sell off all the images. The one in the window should be your catfish being eaten by a crocodile. That's going to get people in through the door, if nothing else.
I want to see someone hang that on their wall, though.
I think they should. I mean, it'd be a talking point. I'm not sure that it's going to add to the aesthetic of most people's houses, but there you go. Horses for courses.
Right in the dining room. All your guests can sit there around the table and lose their appetite. I don't know.
In an awkward silence, they're just going, did you have to? Why? Why have you put this on the wall? But it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because actually, the photographs that a lot of us take when we're on safari, you'll take a beautiful image like this and it works brilliantly and it tells a story and things like that. But it's often the other images, like photographs that you take in high key or low key, or you're playing around with motion blur, which lend themselves to being printed.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100% with that. It's a lot of times, one of my favorite things that happens in a workshop is when I push somebody to try something new and they actually do it. And then they look at it and they go, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And now they're doing that all the time, So I'm always excited to explore new things. And I feel like when your clients do that too, they have a really good time and they learn a lot too.
That's it. Exactly. So, I mean, if you are interested in joining Steve at any one of his safaris, we'll leave a link in the description down below and you can get in touch with him, whether it's coming to see us or you do a lot of stuff in Costa Rica as well, don't you? And other places in that side of the world.
We have workshops in Costa Rica. We have workshops in the Galapagos. We have workshops in Tanzania.
And now we're gonna work on some other destinations for you and convince you to add more to your schedule. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to move on to Steve's next image. So we'll see you in a second. Welcome back to the Pangolin podcast with my guest today, Steve Perry. Now, just before the break, we mentioned that you go to Costa Rica, and I believe this next photograph was actually taken in Costa Rica. Would you like to tell us a little bit about this and why you chose it?
So this is a photo of a macaw. He's flying straight up. He's facing the camera and his wings are completely backlit. So you're basically seeing his belly, and in his mouth is a little bit of palm fruit. It's one of those we were talking about earlier where it's a little bit unique. It's not just a standard flight shot. I just feel like this one has a very, I guess, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but like an angelic feel to it. It looks like an angel reaching up to the heavens. The background's really dark, and all of that was deliberate. And you can see in his mouth, he's got a little palm fruit in there. And these guys love to eat these palm fruits. So what they do is they're very cooperative about it. Otherwise, it'd just be a mob scene. So what they do is they take turns going over to the palm tree with a fruit. They break it off. And as soon as they break it off, you get ready because they're going to drop and they're going to fly up. And that's exactly what this guy did. And they were going back and forth from this branch. So I just positioned myself so that I could get a dark background and backlight so that I could get this particular shot. And it took a lot of shots, but this is my first trip to Costa Rica with the Sony A1. And I was having a great time with it because it was so much easier to use than what I'd used in the past. And I was able to track the bird real well. I was able to keep it in the frame. This is basically a full frame shot. I just kind of cut the sides off for an 8x10. It was really close on those tail feathers, as you can see, but I wanted to get that nice big full frame shot. So if I ever wanted to make a big print, I could. And I really wanted to take advantage of the backlight. The metering was a little bit tricky. I was in manual mode and I wanted to make sure that I had enough shutter speed. So I was at 3200th of a second, which is kind of my standard bird and flight shutter speed. And then I just adjusted it so that I was just to the point where I was not clipping those highlights there. In a situation like this, you definitely need to go full manual. A lot of times people get a little hesitant to go full manual, but if you're in a tricky lighting situation, sometimes it's better just to do the driving yourself.
Take control. And this is this sort of shot is tricky enough as it is, but if anybody's watching this and is shooting, say with a DSLR, has moved over to mirrorless as well, when you don't have the advantage of the new technology of animal eye tracking and that sort of thing, what would be your tip? What's your tracking technique? Because this is a bird that's flying down, flying up in light with
Mhm.
dark background. I mean, where
Right.
do you go to with that?
Well, my advice would be to take that DSLR, sell it, and get a Sony A1 or a Nikon Z9. Just kidding. I had two DSLR shooters with me, and
Yeah.
admittedly, they were frustrated. It's one of those things where there is an edge. We can pretend there's not, but I also, one of the things I like to do is just to be brutally honest with people. Let's tell it like it is. However, this is not impossible with the DSLR. They both got nice shots using a DSLR, and in this case, I think both of them were using D850s, and you put it into Group AF, it's going to be great. Canon DSLRs, I think, have Zone, which is similar to Group AF. And the biggest trick is you need to set that autofocus. You don't really have tracking. So you need to set that autofocus point where you want the bird's head. And then basically, as you're tracking, you're going to do everything in your power to keep the bird's head in that area. And it takes a little bit of practice. In this particular case, it's even harder because with a bird flying left to right or right to left, it's fairly easy to kind of pan that way. We're all used to panning like that. In this case, it's a sweeping motion. So you have to go down and track him up. And it's a little bit more difficult, but with practice, it's like the biggest piece of advice I have is just practice. Head out to some place where you have birds that you don't care about. Seagulls, something like that, or gulls. I'm sorry, if you call them seagulls, the birders go crazy.
There's no such thing as a seagull. There's a gull. There we go.
There's a gull.
Sorry, birders.
Yeah, and if you call them seagulls, the birders come right after you. But that's okay. I'd rather be right. That's fine if they do. But you go out and do some gulls, middle of the day, crappy light, who cares? Don't even take pictures. Just get the feel of moving the camera and keeping it on the bird. And I tell you, an afternoon or two of doing that, for a few hours, it will just skyrocket your ability to get those good bird flight shots.
It'd be interesting to see now, you mentioned some of the older gear that you were using when you were just getting started with this. And with today's technology, I wonder if the actual percentage of shots which are keepers is any different to what it used to be back in the day, because we take tens of thousands of images and technology is there on your side.
I think it's still better. I know we have the faster frame rates and that, but the technology makes such a difference. Just this photo here of the macaw flying with its wings spread is a good example. My keeper rate was far higher than theirs, but they go back a little farther though. Go back to the manual focus days. I remember I was looking through an outdoor photographer magazine, and there was some slow flying bird in there in flight against a blue sky. It was incredibly boring by today's standards. If we were in Lightroom, we'd hit the X key. Okay, it was boring.
Yeah.
But back then, and it's like, can you believe this? My gosh, what kind of skill did it take to manually focus that lens and to get a sharp, great blue heron or sandhill crane in flight? And the average person back then just was not doing that. It's just not going to happen. And now, pretty much with 5 minutes of instruction, I can get anybody to get a sharp bird in flight shot, especially if it's a slower flying bird, if they have a modern camera.
But instead of it being one or two photographs out of your roll of 36, now they've got 10 keepers out of 3,000 that they just took.
Well, hopefully they have more than 10. More than 10.
Hopefully.
But the other thing is you get better quality keepers now too. And I think that's something that people don't think about all the time. It's when I take, let's say, a yellow-billed stork, a fairly slow-flying bird, it's going by. When I take that with my modern cameras, there's a good chance that if I take 20 frames, most of those are going to be good. But what I get to do now is I get to pick which one of those is the best keeper. So in the past, if one of those, let's say back in the early DSLR days, maybe you got one of those sharp. That's the one you keep because the other ones are garbage. Now we get to pick which one of those 20 we want. So it's not so much about keepers. They're all keepers, but it's about better keepers.
Absolutely. On a previous episode, we've spoken with Mark Cowadine, who was the head of the judging panel for the Wildlife Photographer of the Year. And it's very interesting to hear his stories about when he was judging. It's a quantum change almost every year with technology coming in. So photographs that would have won something 20, 30 years ago wouldn't even make it past the first round now.
Right. But I think that's good though. I think one of the advantages technology gives us is that it allows us to focus more on the creative and artistic aspect of the photos. For me, I hear people say this all the time. They say, technology is destroying photography. Just point the camera and it does everything for you. And Here's the thing is if you've relied on being technically proficient to have an edge over your competitors, those days are gone. That does not exist anymore. And what little is left of it's going to go away in the next 5 years. Where the future lies, in my opinion, is with creativity and art and artistry. I think that's where the better photos are going to start coming. I want the camera, I want that technology to stay out of my way. I don't want to have to chase a bison around my viewfinder with a single AF point. I want the AF point to get on there and then I don't have to think about it. I want the exposure to just work. I don't want to think about any of that. I want to look at the composition. I want to look at my subject placement. I want to look at my background, my lighting direction. Those are the things that make great photographs. Almost universally, when you look at a good photograph, it's not so much that it's technically perfect because we can do that all day long. It's that it has some artistic or creative aspect to it that is unique and interesting. And that's what's drawing people in.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So yes, use the tools available to us. Okay, talking about the tools available to us, I think you are unique in the fact that during this podcast, you have talked about your Nikons and you've talked about your Sonys as well. And yes, for a lot of people, they are very much, one brand, and that's what I work with. So your brand affiliation wavers between the two and probably to other brands as well. Is that something you've always done?
There's a little story there. When Nikon was kind of behind Sony, like way behind Sony, remember that? There were rumors that they may not even survive. And it seemed like Sony would be a good place to move over to, or to at least have, should Nikon maybe not actually ever get it together, which of course they of course did. So I kind of ended up with the two systems, and I like them both. They're both really good. And I kind of use them back and forth. This has been more of a Sony year because I had a new book that I'm putting out with the Sony A1 Mark II guide that I had out. So I've been using that a little bit more. I have a feeling we're going to see some new stuff from Nikon next year. So I'm sure I'm sure 2026 will be a Nikon year for me, and all the Sony stuff will collect dust. So.
Well, there we go. So yeah, the arms race between the major brands will continue. Well, it's good for all of us, isn't it? I suppose if they're all going to be pushing the boundaries and competing, then it doesn't matter which brand you are, and you don't need the latest, greatest, gear to get these sorts of shots these days. You can use really good prosumer level cameras and get extraordinary shots.
Yeah, it's the golden age of digital photography, or I hope it is anyway. Who knows? Maybe it's going to get better. But right now, we have so much capability, and we can do so many things that were just impossible. Not even like just 5 years ago, were much more difficult or impossible than what we have now. It's fantastic. It really is a good time to be a photographer.
The golden age of photography. You heard it here first. There we go. Let's get some T-shirts made up, shall we? Okay, let's move on to your fourth image. Tell us about the story behind this shot.
This is in the Galapagos. This is a little sea lion pup as he is surfing the waves looking for his mother. So what had happened here is his mom went out to fish, and I think he was asleep when it happened, and he was kind of going up and down the beach looking for what happened to her. This was with a workshop. So a few of us, not everybody, what we did is we would basically run down the beach as fast as we could to get in front of him. And I got out all the way into the water. So this was a brand new Sony A1 Mark II. So this could have ended poorly. And a 300-2.8, I think, too. So that was, this may have been a bad idea. Don't do this at home. So I run in front of him. I run out in the water. The waves are breaking. So I'm one eye on the waves and one eye on the sea lions. And of course, I wanted to get kind of eye level. So, not only am I running out there, I'm going down on my knees as he's coming towards me. And then when he got close enough, I got out of the way. And just to be 100% clear, because that sounds kind of bad if you're, concerned about the animal's welfare, these guys are 1,000% acclimated. They do not care about us at all. If I would have stayed in the water, he would have gone just right next to me. We do not change his behavior at all. If I saw him veer off, or if I saw a change in the behavior, we would have stopped doing it immediately, but he didn't care. And we were getting out of his way well before he was like right on top of us. So just to, put everyone at ease, we're very careful with our animals when we're out there. But it was just so much fun running up and down the beach trying to grab this photo. And the failure rate was so high because the camera would focus on the waves. He wouldn't come up high enough. I mean, just anything that could go wrong did go wrong. And, subject detection, it happens so quick. It doesn't have a chance to really grab on. So you're basically using single point and just try to hopefully that you're someplace near the eye as he's racing towards you. So it was a tricky shot. So that's why I included it here. But I really enjoyed taking it.
I love the idea of a seal going backwards and forwards up and down the beach. And every time he pops out to the end, there is Steve Perry off of YouTube standing there trying to take a photograph of him. And it's like, I just saw this guy. I just saw this guy back there. What the hell? It's interesting you talk about ethics. I mean, ethics in wildlife photography or in any type of wildlife encounter is very much in the news at the moment. You know, over the last few months, we've had lots of stories, especially coming out of East Africa as well. What's your take on this? And how do you explain to your guests that we need to draw the line somewhere?
It's always tricky, especially when you have guests with you. It's a little bit easier when you're by yourself because you're not under any pressure to get a photo. Basically, my guidelines, though, whether I have guests or not, is how much are we changing the animal's behavior and is it detrimental? We were talking about the sea lion coming towards the camera. And again, if I had saw a change in his behavior, we pulled the plug. And fortunately, the guests usually understand that kind of stuff. They get it. It's a little bit difficult because you want to make sure that your guests are getting the photos, but you also want to make sure that you're not endangering the animal. So you have to kind of walk that line. And, there's extremism on both sides. My big indicator that I'm doing something wrong is if I'm changing the animal's behavior. If we're in the truck and we're trying to get a photo, or we're in the boat and we're trying to get the photo, and the animal moves once, maybe we'll try it again, moves twice, it doesn't want its photo taken. Let's move on. Let's find something else. We do our best not to pressure them. But I think there's extremism there too, though. You'll have somebody, if you happen to accidentally have a bird take off on you, and they're like, you made that bird take off. Meanwhile, in order to get to that spot, we were driving in a safari vehicle or in a boat, and 300 birds took off in our path on our way there, and nobody said a word about that. You have to really balance it so that you're not harming the animals, you're not causing them any undue stress. But at the same time, you want to make sure that your guests are getting nice shots because it's better to have tourism than not. I was talking to my friend Dennis in Costa Rica. One of the things they discovered there was that with tourism, it's actually more beneficial to keep the rainforest than to cut it down. So if there is a little tiny bit of pressure on those animals, sometimes that's an okay trade-off. But again, I think you have to be very ethical about it. If you're following an animal that wants to be away from you, you're doing it wrong. If you are constantly calling birds in using a bird call and you're doing it over and over for half an hour and everybody else is doing it, that you're crossing a line. If you're baiting animals with other animals, you're crossing a line. I mean, everybody's got their own take on this, of course. I'm sure the comments are going to explode with agreement and disagreement on this one.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why we love having you in the Chobe and going on safari with you. It's great to work with like-minded people like yourself. We are going to move on to your fifth image. But before we do that, we are going to take a little break. So we'll see you in a second. Welcome back to the final section of the Pangolin podcast with me, Toby German, and my guest today, Steve Perry. Now, this is the part of the show where we've invited Steve to select an image that he's going to hang on the wall of his humble dwelling that was taken by another photographer, a photo that he perhaps wished he'd taken himself or a photographer he admires. So, Steve, will you please tell us about your guest photograph?
This photograph, we have a little lion cub, and he's situated with a rock kind of next to him, and he's got one arm up on the rock and the other one's on a rock below it. So he looks like he's just kind of posing there. But the important thing is behind him is the lioness, and she is yawning, but she looks like she's roaring. She's got her mouth open. You can see her teeth. It's a very dramatic image. It sort of shows what the little guy or little girl looks like now and what the future holds.
And the photographer is?
And the photographer is actually my wife, Rose Perry. She's one that I definitely admire, and she does a really good job. And one of the things with this photo that was really frustrating for me when I saw it was that I was next to her and I didn't get this one. And this happens frequently with the two of us. And what happened was I was either distracted or I didn't like the lion yawning behind the cubs. So I stopped it. But Rose said, hey, this is what he looks like now, or what she looks like now. And this is what the future is going to look like. I'm like, how did I miss that? So that's one of the things I like about shooting with Rose. And one of the reasons I admire is a lot of times she will have a completely different take on a scene or even a photo. We'll both shoot the same photo and we'll come up with two completely different results. And sometimes I like her results better than mine. And sometimes we work like a team. Like at the beginning of the video, I had the longer lens and I got the close up with that catfish. But a lot of times she comes up with very interesting stuff that I sometimes miss. She's got a different eye, and I like to think we complement each other.
And with the gear choices that you have, obviously you mentioned she had a 400, you were on a 600. Is that the standard ones that you reach for? Or are you very generous in sharing the gear?
Oh, no, we are not generous at all with the gear. We fight over it if it comes down to it. Fortunately, usually what happens is in order to prevent arguing who gets this lens or that lens is I'll take one set of gear, Nikon or Sony, and she'll take the other set. And usually what set I end up taking is the one that I'm currently working on. It's like, okay, I'm writing a book on this particular camera, so I'm going to need to use, that gear. As far as lenses, it depends what we're shooting. She prefers the 400-2.8 a little bit, just because it's a little bit easier to handle. It's not significantly lighter than a 600. People think it is, but it's a little easier to handle because it's a little bit shorter lens. A lot of times I kind of lean towards a 600, but we were up shooting bears in Alaska. We were both shooting 400-2.8s. Sony for me and Nikon for her. But I was jealous of that teleconverter in the Nikon 400-2.8. And she made sure that she clicked it and showed it to me a few times too, just to watch as I was trying to get the teleconverter on or off the other lens. That was fun.
Passive aggressive teleconverter application. It's just like, there you go. Bet you wish you could do this, don't you?
Oh, yeah. My guests were doing that on this last trip too. That was fun.
Are you quite competitive with Rose? I mean, you say you work as a team, but are you sitting there sometimes going, well, that's very nice, but look.
Oh, sometimes I'm a little jealous. I'm not proud of it, but sometimes I get a little bit jealous. I'll see something like, dang, why did I not get that? How did I miss that shot? So yeah, there's always a little bit of competition in there. And I know sometimes I drive her absolutely nuts. She's a saint to put up with me. She really is. So
there we go. Well, I'm going to wrap things up in a minute. And the last question we like to ask all of our guests is that you are going to live in a humble dwelling somewhere in the world, and these are the images you're going to hang on your wall. So the question we'd like to ask our guests at the end is, where is that humble dwelling going to be?
I've thought about this one a little bit, and it's a really hard. Do you know how hard this is to answer? This is tricky. I think for me, I kind of lean towards the Galapagos. I want to say Alaska with bears because I'm kind of obsessed with that at the moment. But the problem is you stay for an indefinite amount of time, and I don't like the cold. So I'm going to go someplace warm. So I'm going to pick the Galapagos so that I have nice sunny beaches. And that's all still new and shiny for me too. We've only gone there. We've been there about a month at this point. So we're definitely looking forward to coming back and exploring some more. So I think that would, for right now, for this year, that's my answer.
There we go. Well, that seems like a very sensible sort of pragmatic solution, thinking about the lifestyle as well as the subject matter. I couldn't agree with you more. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for making time in your very, very busy schedule. Really appreciate it. Please say hello to Rose for me.
Absolutely. I'll let her know you said hello. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for listening to episode 10 of the Pangolin podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, we'd love to hear your comments and feedback, so please leave them in the comments section down below. If you don't want to miss the next episode or any of our other wildlife photography videos, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with the notifications on. Finally, don't forget to sign up to the Pangolin Photo Safari's Friday Focus newsletter. You can do that by heading over to pangolinphoto.com, or you can scan the QR code on your screen now. I look forward to seeing you on a Pangolin Photo Safari soon, and all that is left for me to do is to say that the Pangolin podcast was hosted by me, Toby Jermin, and produced and edited by Bella Falk. Thank you.